So, Kevin, you went to Harvard, right?
Yes, sir.
What year did you graduate?
2014.
So tell me, well, let's go back a little bit. So a lot of international students, as you know, or I should say, actually, most students who want to go to university, but particularly international students, Harvard is a big name. It's scary, right? It's a big name, but it's also something that everybody wants to get into, right? So, how did you decide you want to go to Harvard?
It's an interesting situation because my wife, I had started a business. I've started multiple businesses in my career, and in 2000 I started a business, and then I think it was 2010 or so. My wife was pregnant with our second daughter, and I started to get a little nervous, and I
Mhm.
started to think about what I wanted to do when I become a big boy, and so. My wife's uncle is the IT director for Harvard College, and so we went out to visit her family out in Cambridge that summer. And I walked into the Bloomberg Library, and I had just one of these absolute aha moments. Like it was like a beam of light. Like it just felt right. And I looked around the Bloomberg Library, and the Harvard Business School library is hosts the largest business periodical in the world. Like they have the most business periodicals in the world. So to see the massive data that they had, physical data, not like, all these young kids with everything in the cloud, like
Right.
physical books that I could touch.
Yeah.
And I was just overwhelmed with that. And also, I was thinking about all the great minds that created great things. And it was the right thing to do. And so we drove out there, and we live in Chicago, just outside of Chicago. So we ended up driving back. And so for the rest of the 3 days in the car, all my wife heard about was, how am I going to get into Harvard? Can I get into Harvard? What should we do? Can you help me with my essays? So by the end of the trip, she was extremely annoyed, would have rather me gone on unemployment than go back to business school. And so that summer I wrote all my essays, and I got an acceptance letter. And for about 14 seconds, it was one of the coolest experiences of my life. And then the 15th second, I had this waft of fear because I had to figure out how the heck I was going to pay for this.
That's awesome. But actually, I want to get to, you said something very interesting. So, but before I say that, it's you and I, you took me actually to Harvard a couple of years back. So we went, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I didn't go to Harvard, but when you walk in there, there's something about it. There's just, it's an interesting feeling. I don't know. I think I mentioned this to you while we were there. I said that maybe the fact that there's so many great minds or so many people that have changed the world, and I think you said in a good way and a bad way.
Yes.
So both, but a lot of people have come from there, which is amazing. So it does give you that feeling. But you said you started writing the essay and application and all that. So what was that like? The application process.
Well, the application itself wasn't terribly, complex. In some of my other businesses, I had been done contract negotiations and contract writing and all that kind of stuff. So the actual application in and of itself wasn't challenging. It was just pretty much, simple input. But what was challenging was the essays. You know, I'll get into, if you would like, in a little while, Harvard's methodology of how they teach. But I studied a lot on their culture and how they actually teach their students and their network. And that's how I wanted to write my essays. So the Harvard utilizes what's called the Socratic method. So instead of like the olden days where you had the professor at the chalkboard and he was writing down, and there was a very cause and effect kind of student professor relationship where the professor was, creating ideation, showing you how to solve a problem, and then either you solved that problem at that moment or you went home and it's up to you to figure it out.
Yeah.
But that's not how business works. That's not how critical thinking is taught. And that's something that was very important to me, because if you look at a business problem in a certain time frame, we deal with these this is one of the magical things, is the Harvard Business School case studies.
Okay.
And so I've read thousands of these on businesses in all different business type of sectors. And one of the things that is great about the case studies is it freezes it in a moment of time. And it sets up a set of problems, real case studies of problems that were created within a business in various maturity phases, whether it be a startup, a mid-grade business, or somebody that was on the more mature side of the cycle. And they were dealing with real world problems with real world people. And they gave you all of the challenges that those executives or decision makers had to overcome. And it was up to, at the time, exactly. Like, you know, now it's easy to say, well, they should have just Googled the problem. Just watch a YouTube video. But back then, you know, at that particular time, they didn't have all the resources available to them. And so it was like, now what would you do? What would you do as a leader to solve this problem? And so generally the class sizes are around, depending upon which class, about 90 people. So it's a big, big room. And of course there's smaller, you know, rooms, but generally that was the size. And it was really interesting because there were so many different perspectives. And of course, being a very culturally diverse institution that Harvard it really welcomes, there's all sorts of these different minds all over the world that come into this one room, and they all have different ideas. And then you're all thinking, and as soon as you think you have an idea, then you hear somebody else like, wow, I would have failed. You know, that's the idea. And then you come up with this really great methodology. And in fact, that was one of the weirdest, it was very odd for me, because coming from other learning type of institutions, it was always the professor was the king, and there was this power struggle. The professor had all the power, and then the student had little power. And here, not saying that the students had the power, but the professor was more of a shepherd, or more guiding the conversation and asking critical questions as to why you would make a decision or make an assumption or make a hypothesis, rather than telling you how you should think. And that is critical. And to me, that is mission critical in life. And not only is it mission critical in business school, in business, but it's mission critical in life, because it teaches you how to be a critical thinker.
That's pretty cool. That's amazing, actually. It's a great experience. Were there a lot of international students, or I know there are, but like at a time that you were there in your classes or in your program?
Absolutely. You know, but absolutely. No, my class was very diverse. We broke up. What was really neat was we got to break up. Initially, they put you in like a hall with like 6 people in each hall. And so I was fortunate enough my first year to be the class leader, class president in my group, my section leader. And
like, how does that happen?
You know, it was.
Why did that happen for you? Let me say.
You know, I think I was the most vocal when we got there. I had a lot in common with a lot of the guys. One guy was a cyclist, one guy was a martial artist, one guy was this. And so we just started to get along, and it kind of just organically happened like that. So there wasn't some big test or some big vote, but it kind of, for me at least, my experience was very organic. And the interesting thing was, 3 of my classmates in my hall were from India. One was from Russia, and one was from China. And so it was very interesting to me, because these are different parts of the world that at that particular time I didn't have much experience with in business. And they all came from various socioeconomic backgrounds, various educational backgrounds. And it was really neat to learn from them. And quite frankly, which I would probably expect as most everybody's experience, is a lot of my learning, or my key learnings, happened outside of the classroom, not inside the classroom.
That's interesting. Very interesting. So very cool experiences, actually. Think about, we obviously deal with a lot of international students, right? The number one challenge when it comes to schools like Harvard is not only your education. You know, that's, yes, you have to have, you know, higher grades, better standards to get into Ivy League school like Harvard, but the money, right? How much more expensive it is to attend Harvard. So, it's always challenging and it's always interesting to think about it. I don't know. I don't have any stats on it. I don't know if you do, but like how many people were actually paying out of pocket versus how many people, not exactly how many people did actually get like scholarship or fund. I'm sure it's never easy. And then we always tell obviously students that it's never easy to get scholarships or fund, but I'm sure it's 10 times probably harder to get a scholarship or fund when it comes to Harvard.
That's a very great question, and I have not done any good research on that,
Yeah.
so I can't give you any real stats. It's something I'll have for our next podcast.
There you go.
But I will definitely have that information because that's actually a very good thing to know. But if I had to make a hypothesis, I would say that I believe the last time I checked this, and don't quote me on my numbers, but I believe it was around 6.8 to 7.5% of all the applicants that apply to an institution like an Ivy League school, like a Harvard, that's their acceptance rate. So you can imagine it's a very small window. And I would expect that same small window can be associated to the same types of people that are all fighting for those scholarships to get into and pay for these types of experiences. And so I don't know if that answered your question, but that's probably the best but that's of course a very, very big concern.
Yeah, it always is. Yeah. So again, when you think about it, a lot of students want to go to Harvard. Imagine that somebody does qualify from education academically as well as financially. Like, what do you suggest before they apply? As someone that went to Harvard and you were in the environment, like, what do you think they should be doing right now in order to like make the entire like application, and I just don't mean the application, but just the entire like presentation of themselves as an application much stronger?
Well, I kind of think, let me use an analogy that I think everyone will understand, and then we can get back and I'll directly answer your question. Sure. I think about, business. Like when I was at business school, Professor Yaffe, who taught strategy, he would always talk about you need to be 10 times better. Your product, your service, whatever you're offering your customers had to be 10, 20 times better than the competition. And I think a lot of focus went into, if I was designing my wife's headset, because my headset batteries were dead earlier, so I had to use my wife's pink headset. But if I was to design that, I'd be designing this in its most beautiful way, really thinking about the product and, how am I differentiating from other products in that market and so forth. And I think that a lot of times when you go to market nowadays, it's so difficult to remember when I was talking about those power struggles between the professor and the student. Yeah. Now it used to be where there was a big power struggle between the consumer and the seller. The seller had a lot of power because the consumer didn't have all these different environments to access information about what seller was selling. Mm-hmm. And so now the seller doesn't have that power anymore. The buyer has that power. And so, but how does that seller now get loud? This is a noisy world. It's a noisy internet. How do you get noticed? How do you get and rise above that to be unique? And I think that's what I would say to answer your question directly, is it's not enough to just look at your scholastic achievements. That's almost a given. It's kind of like I always say to my team when they bring back an ideation and I'm working with somebody about a vertical that we're trying to generate for revenue. It's like, no, you're celebrating the expected. It's like going to the shoe repair guy and he fixes your shoes and you go home and you tell your family, he fixed my shoes. Woohoo! That's what he's supposed to do. He's a shoe repair guy. So to answer your question, and again, is I think that you have to be much more rounded than just focused on the product, which is you. Meaning you don't just want to focus on your scholastic achievements. Mm-hmm. I think one thing that is very important that I think is lacking, and you heard it first from One Key Visa, but there is a very big market right now that is an open white space for all you developers out there and business-minded marketers of personal branding.
Mm-hmm.
People need to start personally branding themselves just as if they would brand a product. And if you take through an exercise of a marketing framework, that how you would take a product to market, you can Google it, market framework tomorrow, you could Google it and you'll see 1,000 hits. So you can click an image and you'll get an idea of a basic framework of how you would market your product, and think about how you'd market yourself. And that, I think, is a very important aspect, because I think sometimes people can feel a little insecure, they can feel a little intimidated, and maybe not have all of the mirrored reflections that they see inwardly from the world, that they're actually outwardly have inside of themselves, that they don't see because they're living in their body.
That's very interesting. Interesting. What's the
extracurricular activities? They love extracurricular activities. They love diversification. So if you want to go to the English, the business school, or the Kennedy School, or another division of Harvard, whatever you whatever engineering school, you want to go to any one of these very hyper-focused programs, and all you have, which is your CV, your resume, your personal branding. That's a personal branding document. That's what I want you guys to take away. That's one of the things I want you to take away. It's a personal branding document. And all of the personal branding that you have done is all hyper-focused just on engineering, and you have the best GPA. You have the best SAT scores. You have the best of all the things that you would need. You're going to lose.
I don't know.
You're going to lose. You're going to be up against the same level of people. And this is true with any institution. It's true with any institution. You should be looking at different ways of how to be more eclectic and more well-rounded, which again is starting to develop and hone that critical thinking and that more diversification to allow you to be able to be a better critical thinker.
Yeah, that's awesome you said that, because, we always talk about the way that we like to help students, because, so if the goal is to come to the United States to study, right, the first step is to get your admission. And then the second step is to go through, your visa process, and hopefully you get your visa, you come here, right? So I always have been saying this, and I know that you and I had the conversation about this, that, when you pick the right school and when you have these elements that you just name, you have it and you could present it, not only it increases your chances of getting your admission, but it's going to increase your chances of getting a visa, right? Because you can actually show that you did this, through research, and you have an objective, you have a goal, specific thing that you have in mind, and you can provide an overall strategy to say why I'm doing this.
It's a brilliant observation. And as you were saying that, that makes total sense to me. And that also kind of gets back to the point of like almost treating yourself as a little business in a sense. You've got your personal branding, and now what's your strategy? What's your strategy? What's your objective? And how are you going to get there? That's all, everybody throws around these terms like business models and value propositions and missions and all this stuff. And it's like, I think people overthink it and create all these abstract definitions. And it's like, no. Well, I don't know how to create a mission. Well, where are you?
Right.
And where do you want to go?
Right.
And how are you going to get there? That's your mission. Figure it out. But that same critical thinking, I think, is maybe not necessarily so self-evident, to your point about creating a roadmap of how you're going to get there, which, as you pointed out, not only is that strategy going to help you, but it's going to help you in the visa process as well. It's a brilliant point.
Yeah, it is, because, again, I don't want to repeat what I just said, but what we said, but It is like for a U.S. student who is here, it just, you create that roadmap, as you just called it, to get into a school. But for the international students, that could be utilized to tell that officer at the U.S. embassy that why you should give me a visa, why I'm sitting in front of you, why do I qualify, what is my strategy, right? What is my mission, as you just said, right? Here's my roadmap. This is why I'm going to this school. This is why I'm studying this. This is why, particularly, these are my plans, right? I think that makes a huge difference. And to even our personal, like our company data also, like if you look at the number of people who have applied and successfully got a visa versus the people who the first time or second time they got rejected, that the people who always had a strategy from day one, and we helped them out, to figure that strategy out, because that's one of the things obviously we do, much more successful. Like the success rate has been much higher.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can see that.
Very cool. What was the coolest, the most interesting and the coolest memory that you had during your Harvard years?
Well, some of those Harvard memories I can't share because I would be violating personal NDAs with my friends.
Yeah, the one that you can actually say.
Wow, there's so many.
They put you on the spot.
Yeah, you did. There was just so many.
Well, that's something you can think about, and if you don't have it
again, without giving it a lot of critical thought, I'll just tell you like what's in my heart.
Yeah.
A couple things. One was how nervous I was the first day of orientation, and it's loud. There's that noise, that newness, that you could, every sense is heightened. You can smell, you can see, you can hear. And Josh Lerner, Professor Lerner, who is probably one of the smartest men I've ever met, and certainly one of the greatest professors at Harvard. And he he did valuations for like Twitter, like he's smart. And so he was one of the first speakers in the orientation, and he had said something along the lines of like, look around, you're now average. And it was one of those like, okay, like now I'm feeling humble. My sense of nervousness is accurate. That was an accurate feeling. I'm humble now.
Nervous.
But he also said, now look around again. And one of the greatest values that Harvard is going to bring you is not just the education. It's this network. It's this network of people. And that is something that I really took away. And maybe it's not my funnest experience, which I'll tell you a couple of those, but it was that Harvard education was secondary to me it was almost tertiary, actually. The primary was building a network that are like literally lifelong friends right now, and business connections. I had a business problem literally today that it wasn't like a math problem that I could Google. It was a case study problem. And I called one of my friends, and he wasn't able to get back to me. He called me a couple hours later. We had a 10-minute chat, which is all that he had time for. And he gave me some great insights. And that's like the power. Like, so it's like those little things that network is, and also it teaches you how to build networks. That's another very important skill set to learn when you start to get into your career mode or your educational mode, moving into career, is learning how to build networks. And I think, again, to circle back on that personal branding yourself and understanding who you are is a very key aspect of how to truly connect when you network. And then the Harvard education, of course, was fantastic. But all right, I'll tell you a funny story. And I was, quite frankly, while I was telling you that, I was thinking of a cleaner way to tell you this part of the story. So we were sitting, so we had this common area that I was talking about earlier. And, in the common area, you had all these different wonderful technologies. We had TVs and computers that shot up into the screen at big screens. It was like movie drive-in, and we had chalkboards and whiteboards and 4,000 markers in every color and everything like that, and all of that at your disposal. And I was working on a problem, and I'm a particularly slow reader, I found out. And so I was having a really hard time with this particular case study, and all my friends, it was a Thursday night. And that Friday, we only had a couple classes, so everybody was leaving. And in fact, one of our guys in my class was a professional baccarat player, believe it or not. And he was flying to Vegas for the weekend. And he invited all of us to go to Vegas for the weekend. So they were going to have a limo come pick us up in Cambridge, and then drive us to Logan, and then fly back on Sunday night. And I was like, on Thursday, I was like, I can't, man. I don't understand this problem. I don't know what I'm doing. I have no idea what's going on. And so they all went out that Thursday night, and I was still in the common area working. And they didn't get home till like 11:30, 12:30 at night. And one of the guys, this guy, walked in, and he goes, Kevin, what are you doing? You're still here? You're in the same spot, and there's no progress. You've made no progress. It's been hours. What are you doing? And I cannot figure this thing out. And it was this problem on the chalkboard. And he walks up to it very nicely, like looks at it, erases it, like 17 chalk marks with me. Boom. He goes, okay, go to bed now.
Really?
And it was just like mind blowing to me, and that was such a wonderful experience, just to
you feel like you should work like probably like 100 times harder.
Oh,
at that moment.
In fact, I didn't go on that trip because I wanted to study all weekend. Yeah. But that was a great memory, and just the whole environment there at Harvard, Harvard Square, and we would go to get this Pinkberry, which was this little ice cream shop in Harvard Square, and it was so fun. And again, that was one of the greatest things too, is like a lot of people studied in different parts of the campus. So Harvard Business School is on the other side of Charles River, where all of the main Harvard College buildings are, which is, as people know, as Harvard Square, Harvard Yard. And so a lot of people went in different areas, but I always loved being on campus or in the library, which again, you've been in, or in Spangler Building, which is where we went in, that's where the cafeteria was and all that. Is just kind of getting that, like you talked about, that omniscient spirit in there. And it just helped me, and I had a really great experience when you and I went and we went back there. When we were walking along the campus, and the new Tata Hall was built, and you saw all the windows on the outside, very modern, beautiful looking building. And I said, that's where all the people, I said, watch. And we saw all these different huge sheets of paper stuck to the glass, and people are all thinking, and one of us, I don't remember which one of us said this, but one of us said, like, the next Facebook is on that window, or the next TikTok or Airbnb or whatever it is on that glass for sure.
That's true.
Cool. It's cool to watch people create
great things. Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. It's interesting. You see, as you were talking about like your, the first day of school, and you said, your professor said, look around, you're now average. Maybe at heart, it's a similar experience. I never forget, like when I came to the US, I went to high school, and my first day, I didn't speak any English. So I never forget, it was August, right? So school started up in September. So I went to school not knowing any English, and my first class was ESL. And I walked to my teacher, my Mrs. Kim, her name was, I never forget. And I said, I don't know how, somehow with very broken English, I said that I can't speak English, right? Well, I was in an ESL class, and then she said the same thing. She goes like, that's okay. That's what you're here for. Look around.
And did they only speak English to you in that class? Like, it didn't matter. Like it was trial by fire, kind of like full immersion.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And I think that actually helped me to learn faster or be able to speak faster because I didn't speak, as I said, English, but my first and second, I remember it was ESL. And then after that, it was like math and then history and then everything else that I had to take, right? So at the first, perhaps like maybe 2 weeks, I couldn't understand anything. Honestly, like all I could hear my teacher is just saying, not in a bad way, no disrespect, just saying like blah 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 blah. That's what it sounded.
Like the Snoopy teacher.
Yeah, that's what it sounded to me because I couldn't understand anything, and I wanted to go back so bad. I said, "This is not. I can't do this." But thankfully, I had a good support of my brother. Kept like calming me down and like kept guiding me. And after a couple of weeks, it became normal, and here I am.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's very cool. Well, awesome, man. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
That's it?
This is great. Yeah. Well, I'm keeping you to your word. You said that we're going to do more like next episode.
Yes, and in fact, if anybody at this point, I know Ash and I are going to be coming up with all sorts of cool things coming down the pipeline that we're going to be offering and creating and working with you. And but on the personal branding side, Rohit Deshpande was my marketing professor, and he is brilliant. There's a lot of great Harvard Business Review articles that he has written. But if you would like to email me at kevin@onekeyvisa.us, I have a ton of information that I can provide to you on the specific personal branding side. And I can send some information to you, and eventually we're going to start creating this as part of our frameworking with our customers and with you, the students. But but right now I can start kind of feeding you some information and he was one of the first people to really kind of mention that term to me, personal branding. And it's a little bit different than, of course, branding a product or a business. But I think I could give you some pretty interesting frameworks to start thinking about, which I think is a very critical component for your future growth all around.
Personal development and branding. You're right. That's great, and thank you for saying that. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Great.
All right, man.
Great seeing you. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.